Hey everybody, this is Brian Yellow. On episode number 51 of Origin Stories on Creativity, I had the pleasure of speaking with Hoodoo Jones. He is a Zen Buddhist monk living in South Korea, a couple miles away from the DMZ with North Korea. He is a person who has experienced samadhi, an entanglement of light, he describes it, connecting what he thinks was the consciousness of every person on the planet. That's how I took it. I really enjoyed this conversation. As a practitioner of yoga myself, the idea of sitting still for 8 hours at a time, even 2 hours at a time, seems miraculous. We talked for about an hour and a half, and I enjoyed every little bit of it. He's got a science fiction novel coming out that I believe is called Another End of the World. It's just left his copy editor, and he should be publishing that soon. It's a sequel to his first novel. I'm hoping to have him back on to discuss marketing and what his plans are as far as all that's concerned. And, if I'm lucky, maybe he'll even agree to do Mirage and discuss an author with me or two. Here is Hoodoo Jones.
Zen is the mechanism of art. It's how the whole process works. You get down into some subliminal state where you're not, you kind of remove the arbiter. So you let the flow just appear. You don't try to control it. It's sort of, it's kind of the right brain, the left and right brain bridge. It's developing that part.
So I think of Zen, I think of, Tai Chi, the flow of the moves. And I mean, basically I'm in New York City, so I could walk by a park and see the old, ladies doing the Tai Chi, and they do the flow really nice. And then I do it and I just feel like so dumb. I feel so dumb. I can't get it to work at all.
Yeah, but the thing about Zen is it's more ubiquitous. It's kind of, but you don't do anything special. It's just meditation. You take away all and it doesn't really have a religious context either.
Well, I went ahead and started the broadcast just to let you know, because I didn't want to miss any of the talk about Zen, because it was magnificent. How you've been in South Korea for 10 years? Where are you from originally?
From Louisiana.
Louisiana.
Yeah, I was a DJ back in the 80s. Rock and roll DJ back before I started practicing Zen. In fact, it kind of was part of the process, because I had the night shift at the radio station before I started on air, and just being alone in the dark for hours and hours started some kind of process. And that was before I started writing. But something was happening back then, even then.
Do I sound okay to you? There's no robot or graveliness or anything like that, right?
No, it's very clear.
Okay, good. You sound good as well. Do you like rock and roll?
Sure, but it evolved a lot since then. If you work on a classic rock station, you don't really listen to rock and roll. You turn it off. It's too much repetition.
No, I got you. Absolutely. And that'd be like the great environment to write. Do you do it in a notebook, or did you have an opportunity to write on a computer in the 80s? I mean, I guess that would be hard.
No, it didn't really start then. It was kind of just something that was, actually, I was more of a musician back then. I was writing music. Yeah, but the music, the part about the music, I think the real important part is the lyrics. There's something about the poetry of it that I couldn't figure out. And, to me, writing is the most evolved form that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what started it, right? Between two civilizations or two towns. That's how you got the message across. I mean, you can send your little guy there to get your how many pieces of corn you harvested in one season or another, or you could write it down and get the message across as succinctly as possible.
Yeah, that's
the
exactly
basis of human communication.
Yeah, and I was frustrated with music as a medium of saying something. Not that I had something to say back then, but there was something developing. And I started practicing kind of more or less just to keep my energy, kind of like the Tai Chi you were talking about, to have something in the middle of the night to wake me up and to keep me focused, because it was hard to do a night shift, you know.
So let's talk about Zen. When you discovered Zen, when you were
Uh-huh.
in a radio station and playing rock and roll for people to listen to, what was it though with that you were experiencing? Was it you weren't meditating, or you were meditating?
No, I started with yoga, I guess, maybe a couple of
Uh,
years,
I do
and
yoga
just
too. I
yeah, just
love
to
yoga.
yeah, the body energy, the body high, you know, and just reading the text and studying it, because I was fascinated with the states of mind I was getting through there. That, you know, it became more or less a preparation for meditation, the way that I saw it.
Hmm.
So I started to look into meditation, and Zen was the thing that really stuck out. I think mainly at that time because it didn't have a lot of religious context. I'm not really a religious person.
Yeah, either am I. My teacher today was talking about how yoga definitely prepares your body for meditation, how it strengthens it, so you could sit there and you could actually meditate without hurting yourself, which was an odd, it was an odd kind of admission, because I never thought meditation had a physical component to it, but you are kind of sitting there in a rigid state.
Yeah, and that's kind of the first step, is you have to, your body's first. It has to be able to stay stationary for a long period of time. The retreats we do in Korea, the tradition I'm in, they're 3 months long, and you sit maybe 8 to almost 20 hours a day. It depends on the retreat.
Wow.
And yeah, and you have to really master it before you can start that kind of training. And
I
that's
don't think
twice a year.
I don't think I can get my mind like to stop working for 8 hours, man. I don't
Yeah.
think I can do that. How do you
But if you
get your
think about
body
it, well, you have to you have to break through a number of walls to get to that point.
right? I wouldn't imagine. Oh my God. Eight,
I
I
know
mean,
it
I can
sounds
even do it for
impossible.
like 15 minutes. I was like, I
Yeah.
can't do it for an hour. I'm sitting in yoga class going, okay, I'm going to eat this for breakfast and then I'm going to do this for an hour. I'm like, I can't even get my mind to stop.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I
But,
think it's even more impossible these days. People are so distracted, you know.
right.
Not
And
that
my
it, I
phone
don't
is
think it,
sitting like a foot away from me. Like, I wonder if I have a tweet.
yeah, I have that too. You know, I don't
How do
think
you
it's a
do it?
problem.
How do
I
you
don't
do
think
it?
it's a problem. Um, it's you develop a different part of your mind. You know,
Uh-huh.
there's an interesting article. Um, this, you know, Michael Gazuniga. Have you heard of him?
I don't
He just
know. I
put a
don't
book
think
out.
so.
Probably it's kind of, you know, he's a scientist with neurological research.
Hmm.
He just put a new book out called Tales from Both Sides of the Brain. And there was an interview with him on NPR, and he talked about how working with these lobotomy patients, where they split the brain and they have, you know, this unique opportunity to look at the construction of how, you know, the brain functions from both sides. And he said the right side of the brain is actually like another entity. It doesn't have the ability to communicate, but it can point at an image that relates to the subject, something like that. You know, it does have, there's something about it that has its own operation. He said actually there's many entities in the human. But the interesting part of that is that back in the past, you know, maybe 60,000 years ago, when we split off from the gorillas in Africa, that there was a change in the mind, that there was something about the mind to two entities, that the monkeys, gorillas only have one, he said. There's something about the human, like we've been in conflict for our whole history. I think this is part of it, because we're not one entity. We have multiple, and they don't even communicate with each other well. So it's something like that. Like meditation is going deeply underneath this this wall of noise from the left side of the brain, the active thinking part, and starting to connect to that deeper stream, which is, to me, is what writing is about. Anything that's come out of the ethers, you know, this original voice or whatever that you develop, is is stuff that's never appeared before in the human record, right? It
That's very
comes
true.
through,
It's very true. It's like a
yeah.
fingerprint, because two people can sit in a room and they can write the same exact story and they're going to be totally unique.
Yeah, and you know, also we all connect together. You see so many things if you go deeply underneath, you know. But the point is, once you develop that deep stream, that underneath stream, which we call samadhi, this deep concentration, then
Samadhi.
It doesn't matter what's going on in the surface. Any kind of noise or thinking is fine. It doesn't have anything to do with it. It's a different channel. It's like another dimension.
That's fascinating. So when you reach samadhi, you might be thinking, but it doesn't register.
No, it's you have more space around it. You're not completely enmeshed in it. You don't believe that that's the only reality. It's kind of like the Matrix in a way, you know, you have some separation from reality so you can look at it objectively.
That's very interesting. And just to go back about the brain being, I read that there were an operation, something that they could do where they can actually sever the brain in half, and
Yeah.
both hemispheres actually develop unique personalities. They
Okay.
become two different people.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. I mean, we are such unique beings, and you can't like pinpoint where I don't know, maybe you can, but I can't pinpoint
No.
where I am in this thing that I call a body. You know, you don't actually exist in the brain. You don't exactly exist in the stomach or the chest or the heart or whatever. And your brain
Yeah.
can break and you still can exist someplace, and it doesn't necessarily be here or be here. It's a very interesting experience being
Yeah.
human.
Yeah, that's the kind of the conundrum we get into. And for some people that's more important than, you know, following a career or some other thing, is trying to get to the bottom of those questions.
The existence.
Yeah, you know, it's something that there's a universal substance. I don't want to go too far into, but you know, there's something about life that there's a quality that doesn't change underneath this eternal part of it that we call thusness, I think, in the West. It's something that in this moment appears as your body or a tree or the sun or any object. It in this moment is the eternal. It seems like it's just an object and it's changing, but it's the eternal appearing thusly in this moment. So the moment world is kind of the key of the whole thing.
What do they call it in the East?
What do they call it in the East? The one mind, which is interesting because the one mind is what we're trying to return. You know, we want to return to this one mind, like previously when we're at peace, as the, you know, and as well, I don't know if animals are at peace, but you know, it's something that we're constantly in conflict with ourselves, with all these different entities, and trying to, you know, find a way to live with all these questions and not knowing, and this bright consciousness that we have. It's
It's very
so
interesting that you say
inquisitive.
animals, though, because when you say animals, I think that's the exact opposite. I think that's where we came from, honestly.
Yeah, of course.
That's where we've evolved from. You say gorillas, I don't necessarily agree gorillas, but we definitely came from sapiens. You know, we came from
Yeah.
a lower life form, and we evolved to this point. I'm reading a book, a really fantastic book called Sapiens. You know, I'm so stuck
I've
in
heard
my
of it. Yeah.
and it's like a history of us, and we spawned from like these many different species of humans. Us, the wise ones, you know, we're the ones that made it to this point where we're, you know, the top dog on the totem pole of apex predators, and we're, you know, ruling the roost right now. But all these other ones have been, you know, they died off. They weren't able to maintain their position on, you know, the dominance structure. But my point being, you know, they weren't able to relax. I mean, we're pulling ourselves away from being animals. This one mind, the universe, maybe in essence, in a way. I don't know. Kind of putting
You
word
know,
salads out there, but
no,
maybe you
no, I
understand what I'm
understand.
saying.
Yeah, sure, but I think it's just science. It's the second law of thermodynamics. It has to go towards more complexity. It can't stay in a simple state. So the single entity of earlier life eventually became two. Maybe it's an anomaly. I don't know why. You know, it's just that's just nature. It happens that way. And
Yeah.
these two, we haven't really resolved what that is. You know, in the earlier society, they thought of the right brain as God, which I think is kind of true in a way. It's something that's this infinite flow that you can connect with if you do. You know, the
It's
dream
very
state.
interesting. I mean, it's very interesting the evolution of what
I,
we are as men,
yeah,
as a
right.
species, as humans, because we always did have that concept of a higher being, God. Where did it come from? And it always kind of meshes with what happens after death in a way.
Yeah, that's what we don't know. That's what we don't know. You know, even I have trouble with some of these Buddhist ideas like reincarnation, which actually is not Buddhist. It predates Buddhism.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like before we have the idea of the theory of evolution, for instance, there were many scientific ideas back then that we don't use anymore, like the four elements. Before we used to think of everything made of earth, fire, water, and ether, something like that. I don't know what the four are, but
What is it? It's
now
water, fire, earth, and is it ether?
what?
Oh,
I don't know.
I could type it in my computer real quick, but I'll let you go ahead and digress. What
Yeah,
were you
but
saying?
now we have the periodic table.
Yeah.
You see, now it's really changed because, you know, with nobody would go back and use that old form. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing with it's the same thing with this theory of evolution, right? You wouldn't go back and use this reincarnation now because we understand that there's an element of time there, that
Yeah.
beings evolved over time. They're not revolving in space in an infinite place, you know, that they started as a single cell and evolved over time. So that's the way I feel about life. It's not something that, you know, you can describe in these old science ideas from the Vedas in the ancient past. It's something
Yeah.
we're still grappling with. And the part of, you know, the periodic table, that doesn't help. It kind of scares me, actually. Like, we understand that all of these pieces that are contain that an atom's made out of, the bottom quark, all these, I don't know how many there are pieces now, but we don't know where they come from, you know.
Yeah, that's the weird thing, isn't it?
Why?
When we look at the
Yeah.
scientific, and they can guess, they can tell us that's what it is, but it's no different than a religion with a priest standing in
Yes.
front of a congregation saying, well, this
Yeah.
is what God
It's
is, this is what Jesus is, this is what whatever religion you come from or want to believe in, the higher person standing in front of you telling this is what it is, a congregation nodding its head going, I believe you, because that's really all you're going to get from scientists or the higher educated person. I mean, you don't know for sure. You're just taking it in, faith.
and yeah, and the Zen halls are littered with scientists or scientists. There's a lot of people like that. You know, even Einstein said that Buddhism is probably the only religion that will survive the scientific age.
And why is that? Do you know why he said
Well,
this?
it's a study. It's not really a religion. It's a study of reality. It's looking directly at what the fabric of reality, which is kind of my connection to cyberpunk and all of this stuff. You know.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the stuff that you have on your website. It's can you tell me what your intentions are? You're working on a novel, right now, or is
Yeah.
that old information?
No, it's finished now. I just got it back from the copy editor a few weeks ago.
Oh, good for
So
you.
yeah, I have a few other books out, but this I decided like an autobiography
Okay.
and a experiment I did a long time ago. Actually, it's kind of interesting because if you want to write literature, you're pretty much on your own, you know. It's very hard to get published these days. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of old school. Like, I really love Dostoevsky and, you know, the existentialist, Henry Miller, Hunter S. Thompson, you
Oh, I
know, this
got
kind
you.
of meaty
Thompson's one
stuff.
of my favorite.
Yeah. So I was writing an autobiographical novel like a Henry Miller or Hunter S. Thompson style about all this crazy Zen life. And I had a hard time finding a publisher. Eventually I self-published and did podcasts and things like that. Uh, but I decided to try a different format because what what I thought was that this market, you know, this really changed for writers and books. It's not really based on, well, I don't know if people even read anymore. The market's really
I'm wondering the
far.
same thing. Everybody seems to be writing, but nobody seems to be reading.
So I tried to do a different style. Like, I was doing a podcast for that first book, and I decided to try to write a chapter or an essay every week and do a podcast, or maybe it was every 2 weeks. I don't remember. It was a couple of years ago, and I called that Field of Weeds, and it was kind of essays about the same autobiographical style, but with some, you know, some some hook to it about life in LA and stuff I was doing then.
Okay. Were you
And
living
I
in
really,
LA at the time? Were you living in
yeah,
LA? Okay.
yeah, I was in LA about 15 years, and I started to develop film too. I was working on short video projects and
Oh man,
documentaries
that
and
brings up
things.
a question I wanted to ask you. Do you call that village? Excuse me. Do you call that video illustration the type of work that you were doing that I was watching? Did you do that work on the video?
Yes,
Yeah. Is that
yeah.
video illustration, or how do you actually do that?
That's After Effects mostly, and you know
After Effects.
all the Adobe's Master Suite. I really love their programs, but it was kind of just trying to develop a style, you know, a filmmaking style, and working in that environment, because that felt more immediate and real and what's going on today than trying to work with books. And but you know, I'm a writer. I finally came to a point where I realized that if you're going to go through film, and I got into some festivals and won some awards, you know, with
Hmm.
some of my work, but if you're going to go to film, then you have to have a lot of money. It's a
Yeah.
real, and
I
and you
I
can't
was
get
watching your
distribution.
videos. I was watching your videos also, and what bothers me, I'm a writer too. I'm a reader. I love that type of stuff. And the reason I like podcasts also is you can put them on pause and come back to them. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, I love podcasts.
Time is a finite resource, and if you watch a video, it's hard to come back to it. You know what I mean? You're kind of sucked into it, and you have to watch it from beginning to end. And I think maybe that's a problem with modern society is you really have to invest that resource into things.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Um,
So,
so
so
moving
this,
from film, you're a writer. You've decided that that's the medium that you want to explore.
so I'm working on Field of Weeds at that time. I want to try to do, this is more of a podcast idea. I'm also in the background developing a film.
Uh-huh.
After I got some awards for this short documentary called Loss of Trust, and then I wanted to try to do a full feature, kind of like cyberpunk science fiction. And I was developing Field of Weeds, and um, I talked to a science fiction writer in LA who's a good friend, kind of a hard-boiled detective style like cyberpunk.
Yeah.
And I was telling him, you know, like the trouble I was having developing, I wanted to develop a new style of writing where you just maybe like a web serial or something where you have, because people don't have time anymore, and
Yeah.
have it broke down into maybe 1,000 word segments, something like that. And he said that's a mistake. He told
Oh,
me, which I didn't really, it didn't register for a while because I was really into my ideas. But he said, science fiction is a very set structure style. You have to write
interesting.
in that structure, or
What
people
was it?
won't read it.
What was the
It's
structure
always,
that he was suggesting?
but he didn't say. And
Oh,
you know, I did my own research. Actually, what I
was
read,
he just arguing against you to argue against you, or is he
no,
really
no, it was a heartfelt. It wasn't criticism. He was trying to save my ass, really.
okay?
So what he said, you know, everybody that's tried some new structure with science fiction has failed. You know, it has to be a certain structure. It's a genre that you
Yeah.
have to write into. So I started to look at story structure, and it really helped me a lot. This Larry Brooks, story physics.
Okay.
Not that
I've
I
never
mean,
heard of
it's
it. No.
he just has his own sort. He looks at the structure of books and explains how the dynamics of you know how modern literature is written, not the classics that I love, which have a rambling, wonderful, you know, Dostoevsky can do a character sketch for a whole chapter, you know,
Yeah.
but that's
I
not
don't
that.
see anything wrong with that. I mean, I got my degree in creative writing, so I mean,
I
honestly,
see.
creative
Yeah,
writing, it's just do what comes natural to you in terms of what would you like to read, what entertains
right,
you.
right.
Larry,
Yeah,
whatever his name is, Larry Brooks, he wants to tell you how to get your books on a shelf that's slowly
right.
decomposing. I think anyway. I mean, I mean, the bookstores are
Uh,
going away, right? I mean,
yes, but
Amazon, in
there's
fact, is selling you more laundry detergent than they're selling you books nowadays.
but there's something in there. The point is that, but you know, I wanted to go into the demon's lair and see what is going on in there. And but
Yeah,
there was something that he
I
said that
love
really
that
struck me.
demon's lair. That's very visual.
But there was something that was in there that really struck me, and I had to write to my friend in LA and tell him about it, because actually he talks about the book broken down into 60 scenes.
Okay.
And these 60 scenes can be about anything, but basically the structure is kind of like the 3-act play. He has his own design of how the structure of the book is, which is wonderful. It helps you to organize and outline your story before you start the writing process. And I use some of his techniques, but the 60 scene thing, since I'm a filmmaker too, really struck me because the 60 scenes are about that, what I wanted to do with Field of Weeds, the 1,000-word or 2,000-word essay that are embedded in a story. So you don't have these breaks. You can always stop at the end of a scene. You don't have to continue reading. You've come to a natural completion of a scene, right?
Hmm.
But it's embedded in a storyline. So it's more soft and comfortable. So that's what the modern book is. You see?
Yeah.
So so I talked to my friend about it and I said, you know what, that guy's right and you're right. That's the way I want to write this book. I want to have my idea of this, segmented story that you don't have to read 1,000 pages of and not know how to continue, or not know when to stop, but have it in a storyline that's real comfortable.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
very
how,
interesting.
yeah, that's how I started with this new book, which it's kind of, I didn't have the idea. It's not really cyberpunk, but maybe it is now. But at that time, it was more cultish. I wanted to write something about, well, like in LA, we had this scene where I was making these small films, and this one of our friends left her bike in the foyer of our house for more than a month. Everybody rides bikes on the beach in the beach cities in LA, so it's kind of, and there's no space, so she wouldn't come pick it up. So what we did, me and my friend, put it in the closet and wrapped it up in some cloth and put belts around it and sent a kidnap video to her. And we made that video and I put it on her doorstep in the middle of the night and knocked on her door and we ran away. So all she knows is there's a blank tape on her doorstep and a video of her bike held hostage. And the problem was resolved right away. So I realized this thing about this leaving a message somewhere on a tape, that communicates with you, kind of ties into my voodoo culture past in Louisiana. And that was the start of a new movie idea about this voodoo cult and this kind of shaman devil figure that is at the core of it. So it was this cult idea, this voodoo style, and at that time it was just when the terrorists started to appear and all this problems with these cell groups. And, it was just that was kind of the way things were going in our news cycle, things that were I wanted to write about,
Yeah.
make my own cell group that was going to do its own, underneath the justice system.
So
So
instead of like a Islamic type of religious group, you wanted to go more of the Haitian voodoo, Louisiana bayou type group.
right. And the group was doing its own form of justice, which basically was against big corporations and big evil, kind of like Ghost in the Shell kind of thing.
I've never seen it, and the movie, unfortunately, I guess destroyed that franchise.
The graphic novel was really good. I think
Oh, the
it's more
graphic novel.
developed.
Okay,
Yeah,
I've never heard
yeah.
anybody suggest the graphic novel. It's only been the what's it called? I want to say manga, but it's not the manga. It's the
Yeah, it's a manga, but it was kind of collected in like the volume one, I believe. Um, it's a very deep dive into cyber. It's a cyberpunk novel, basically. Very intricate.
I need to read it. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. That should be something I read.
it's volume one, Shiro Masamani. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful book. I liked it better than The Matrix, actually. The Matrix was also a big cultural movement.
The idea of artificial intelligence really appeals to me.
Yeah, so now that's the core of my book now, which is,
Artificial intelligence.
yeah, I think that's
Excuse me.
the new thing that everyone wants to write about right now, artificial
Yeah.
intelligence.
Don't say that
And
because that's actually the next novel. The novel that I'm working on right now is artificial intelligence. You need to
yeah,
say it's a unique idea that not enough people are working on, and more geniuses need to be developing work on
well,
it.
well, you need to write one novel, that, well, who knows? I don't say the one, but you need to find the point that nobody has found.
And then what you need to say is the third novel needs to be a ancient Greek mythology piece that explores the prequel of Oedipus Rex in depth detail, and then we'll be
But
friends
that's
forever.
You hit on something though. The idea that I want is to create my own myth and
Yeah.
make a world kind of like what Anne Rice did with the Vampire Chronicles.
Right.
She said, you know, the reason that she did that was because no one else would listen to her otherwise. I mean, that was the only way that she could develop a
Can you
voice.
have a career like Anne Rice though nowadays? That's what I wonder. I do this other podcast called Mirage where I invite an author on to speculate about an author who has already had their career or has has a burgeoning career. They're pregnant with ideas or they've already given birth to their library of books or whatever. Can you have a career like Anne Rice nowadays, or are you going to basically birth 2 or 3 books and then flitter off into the horizon?
I don't know. Do you have an agent?
No, do you?
Yeah. No, I maybe have 300 rejections of the first
Yeah,
project I
I did
worked
the
on.
same thing with an agent when I first published when I finished my first novel. I tried
Yeah.
my hardest to get an agent because I thought that's what you were supposed to do.
Yeah.
Query, and sometimes I got rejected, and mostly felt like the letters got sucked into a black hole and disappeared.
Yeah, so I decided, just to uh I'm a Zen monk now. So I made my life about working on it in a very deep way on a project. I spent 10 years on this another end of the world. Basically, I mean, not 10 years of writing, but I developed as a movie concept first, and then I went through many periods of trying to audition people and trying to figure out how to work it out. And then finally I decided to write it as a novel and do it from the ground up, build some world,
Hmm.
because I mean, I could have made a movie 8 years ago, but I didn't have the money. It was too expensive. And I
Yeah.
realized in LA that the point is I can get Bruce Willis to work on my movie, no problem, but I need a lot of money.
They'll take a
So
paycheck. I mean,
yeah,
there's
no
actors out there
problem.
desperate for work.
Yeah, there's a lot of actors, but if on a real low budget, if you don't have any big names, it's really hard to get people. So I decided to do it from the literature part, just develop that and stick with what my root, you know, what I really care about is the writing.
I had a great grandmother in Appalachia, West Virginia. She lived to 100, and she was like 98 years old. And basically the last few years of her life, she just stared out the front window of her living room. She just sat in this chair. Her Bible's on the table next to her. She just sat and stared all day long. And one day, I'm saying hello to her, and she grabbed my shirt collar and she pulled me into her and said, "Decide on one thing and just do that one thing. Don't
Mm,
multitask." I paraphrased her, but decide on one thing. You want to be a movie maker, be a movie maker. If you want to be a book maker, you want to be a novelist, be a novelist. But you
yeah,
have to do it well, because if you try and your heart isn't 1,000 different places, you're going to be fragmented, right? I
yeah,
mean, it's not going
that's
to be
great
good
idea,
enough.
great advice. But so, and I realized that I'm not going to be making a lot of money. I'm not Anne Rice, so
Right.
and I can't survive. I'm working as a carpenter in LA to pay the bills, and I was living in a very unique environment there because I had a wealthy benefactor, so I could live very well
What
and not work
what time frame were you in LA?
from 99 through 2012.
Wow, so just not too long ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I
loved
thought
it. It
about
was great.
moving. I don't think that's even possible to move to LA anymore.
It's a tough place and you're
Yeah.
alienated. It's hard. You have to develop a circle of friends and you really are in the grid, which is a terrible hellhole unless you have money. You need to be in the beach cities if you're in LA, and that's impossible. It's so expensive.
Oh, I love
But
Venice. What beach city were you
oh
in?
yeah, Hermosa Beach.
Okay. I thought I was that's where I wanted to live, was Venice, but it's impossible.
Yeah,
I don't think it's I mean, I'm in New York
yeah,
City now, but I
yeah.
mean,
I love New
same thing
York.
here kind of.
Yeah, I lived in New York for a while. I was on Bleecker Street and Second and Sixth, and I was in Brooklyn for a
Okay.
while. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love New
Brooklyn.
York.
I've lived up on the Upper West Side, and I've lived in the East Village, and then Park Slope. And now I'm in the Bronx and Ditmas Park and a little bit in Jersey, kind of all over the place.
Yeah, maybe someday I'll be back there. I don't know. But anyway, I decided to make my life because I'm also a Zen practitioner. As a monk, it's very interesting. It's almost like being in a conservatory because I'm focused on this meditation practice, and uh, everything's supplied. There's I even have a pretty good salary. It's mostly focused on uh, just cutting off all the external things going on and focusing. So as a writer, it's a perfect opportunity. And it took me a long time to get to the point where I could live that way and be that focused and want to work that hard.
Yeah.
And but at my age now, I'm 52, almost 52. I'm just a kind of in my artistic peak, and it's wonderful. I'm very happy I'm here. So that's what
That's
I do.
wonderful. What part of Korea are you in?
Now I'm in Busan, but I'm just with some friends. I don't know if you saw the lady that just came in. She's
Oh
my
no, I pace when I do one of these conversations. I'm back and forth,
oh,
back and forth. That's why I don't
right.
keep a picture up. I'm just like back and forth, and I would just stare at myself, going, "Oh, why are you slouching? Pick your head up." I wouldn't be much of a
But
conversationalist. I would seriously, I would just stare at myself. What's wrong with you? Pick your head up. No, I seriously, I'm like back and forth in my office. Just
but mostly in it's called Gaeryong, small town
uh-huh.
outside, maybe a few hours outside of Seoul, and I'm in Seoul sometimes, but I'm training at Baekdamsa it's almost in North Korea. It's on the mountain, the Diamond Mountain that goes into North Korea. So it's a far northwest.
How is how's the attitude there right now? With he just launched 3 missiles not too long ago, and there's that
Uh,
whole whisper of war thing happening.
well, it depends on who you talk to. People are very kind of very peaceful here. It's a uh, Confucian culture. They don't really show you a lot. They're very polite, and
Hmm.
it's a wonderful family style place. But people are scared. I can tell.
Yeah, I've
There's,
read an
sometimes we talk
article.
about it.
I read an article about what would happen if he did launch just an artillery barrage into Seoul, and there's 25 million people there. It's not even about the artillery attack. It's just what would happen if people tried to escape the impending doom, the death and
Yeah,
destruction that would occur.
and
It's scary. I mean, it's just too bad that we can't live in some kind of harmony. But
yeah, that's our divided brains. We just can't deal with it. You know, that Seoul. I don't know if you've been there. It's a big
no,
place. I mean, that like the Gangnam area. It's like Beverly Hills. It's huge. There's so much money and stuff. I can't imagine that would be leveled one day. It's terrible.
it's
It's
unfortunate. I mean, the sad part about it is that country north of you has been kept in, rags for the last 70 years, and because of a political
Yeah, I don't really
ideology.
understand. I don't understand. But the Zen master that I learned from, the first one that I met, Zen master Sung San, comes from North Korea. So
Interesting.
he was that's kind of what happened to him. Usually the backstory of any of these great teachers is some kind of tragedy, because you have to become to a point where you have a break from your life. It's
Yeah.
kind of like Nietzsche talked about this. He said the thing about genius is you have to be in a state of confinement with only one way out. It's some
Uh,
kind of pressure. Yeah, something like that. So he was separated from his family by the Korean War, and just gave up when after the war. Uh, the society started, was still corrupt. It was still kind of there was no way to resolve the problems of society he saw, and so he just shaved his head and became a monk.
it's absolutely fantastic. In terms of giving up things that don't matter, there was a point in my life where I decided that it just doesn't, possessions in terms of extra things just don't have much value. Get some clothes, have clothes, be warm, but beyond that, try to make yourself as happy as possible. What do you want out of life? I want to
Yeah,
be the best writer I possibly can be. Beyond that, what do? You want to entertain people. You want an audience of people to enjoy the kind of effort that you put forth. Kind of like a chef, you know what I mean? Sitting in the back of the
sure.
kitchen making the best food. He doesn't do that because of himself. He's not going to eat that food. He's not going to engorge himself with that food. He's going to make that food for a restaurant full of people. When I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's what I do. I try to make the best food for the biggest audience of people as I can find. And that's what you do as well. I mean, that's what you're hoping to do. You're trying to make the best food for the audience of people and feed them, feed their souls, feed their brains, make them better at thinking,
Yeah.
I
Yes,
guess.
I'm trying to insert something that's very valuable inside a beautiful story, a myth, something that's really that people can absorb. You know, like I think about all the great books that I've read that have changed my life, and because they've given me information and insight into humanity that I didn't have before,
Yeah.
and I'm so grateful to them. And that's something I want to do. From
When when you wrote your cyberpunk science fiction story, did you incorporated an element of Zen into it as well?
well, my version of Zen uh, is kind of nature oriented, and that part is in there. Yes,
Yeah.
it's about becoming aware uh, of a deeper reality, those kind of things. But there's no religious context at all.
No.
Content. No, I always try to stay away from that. But the strength of it is, it's like when I write. I don't know about you, but I can't write a few thousand words a day. Or if I just wrote and I spent all day writing, maybe. But I write maybe a few hundred words, and it's a very intense. It's almost like going into a séance or something. That it just starts to pour out, and I write on pencil, and on paper.
Oh, do you? Oh man,
Yeah.
if I did that, there'd be no way. It's a completely illegible situation at that point.
Mine's almost, yeah, but it's kind of like, like a devil scroll out in the woods, usually out in the woods too.
Oh,
And so,
really?
yeah, so it's something that just kind of, that way, it's like, the planchette of the Ouija board. It kind of just starts going on its own. And for a long time, I thought I was possessed or something because the things
Wow.
that were coming out of me, I didn't have any idea of, and it was out of control.
How do
So
you
that's why. Hmm.
how do you put it from your chicken scratch to manuscript
Yeah,
to manuscript form? Do you have a computer or a tablet or
sure.
anything like that, or you
Yeah.
do?
Yeah, I have everything. I use Dragon. Uh, it's a really great
The
workflow.
voice to text?
Yeah, it works really well, and you know, I don't have to wrangle with the ancient keyboard idea. I can just it's another stage of editing. If you
I see.
speak it, when you speak your text, you see stuff that you don't see if you're just, writing.
It's interesting. I've tried to use it. I didn't like it.
Yeah, but it's really improved. It keeps getting better. So now
Had
it's very accurate
had
these days.
you ever written manuscripts with a keyboard before? You just didn't enjoy the tactile
No,
nature of it? No.
no, it's there's something about the pen. I used to use a real sloppy, huge point pen, that just spread ink everywhere because that way it flowed better. And something about writing, it just has to be messy on a page.
What kind of
But
pen?
I don't remember the pen.
No,
I
no.
don't
What?
remember.
Oh, okay.
Oh, a ballpoint, but it's one of
Oh,
those
okay.
with like a 1.0 or bigger
Oh,
point,
I see.
and one that's really sloppy. That's what I like. The ones that just make a huge pile of ink on the page. But I switched to pencil because, well, like a mechanical pencil, because they flow pretty well too, and you don't get ink all over your clothes.
Oh man, I love
Yeah,
mechanical pencils, except that
yeah.
lead breaks so much.
Well, I use a .7.
Oh, I see. Those are the thicker ones. Um, what is up with Hoodoo Jones?
But that's the thing. Since I am a Zen monk and I'm in I'm in a foreign, environment, I can't really write. I've already been audited. So there's a wall there about what I can say as a Zen monk if I use my monk's name, which when I write, I can't have an auditor there. It has its own way that maybe crosses some line that I can't, that I'm not supposed to. So in order for me to just write uh, honestly, I have to do it under a pen name.
Oh, so Hoodoo Jones is your pseudonym.
Yeah.
Gotcha. It's a
No
neat
way.
name. And when I was looking up, I was trying to get into kind of I was inviting occult guests on the podcast, and that's basically where I discovered you at. I was doing searches on occult and various things like that. And it's very interesting who you can discover. Um, and your name popped up, and you said that you studied the occult and things of that nature. And um, You said this novel explores voodoo.
Yeah, voodoo as like in a more modern context, the idea of voodoo is that, well, there's some kind of supernatural power that you use in order to influence reality. So, but the idea became something, it kind of evolved into something more because with the AI and the modern technology like Ghost in the Shell, then more it became more like this AI was on the verge of becoming sentient. So it became like the mystery of the human mind in a technological format. The same process that we're going through.
Hmm.
But the push that brought it into uh, full sentience was an alien presence. That in the work is a demonic figure. Who is the hero? But you don't know. And so this dark figure becomes the catalyst of evolution of humanity, which is like a Borg-like state, which what the AI becomes.
It's very
So,
interesting. What do you think that the push between AI and sentience is?
okay, the way that I worked it out was kind of this study that was done about the split brain
Hmm.
that I was talking about. It's
Yeah.
kind Michael Gazzaniga. It's like this same thing with you can have this mechanical part of AI that like the algorithms that we use today, but it has to be paired with something else. And that something else was the advanced alien technology. This right brain, this infinite void or whatever that the unknown. So that's the part that we don't have yet in our technology. In my fiction, that's the way I wrote it in the fiction.
So obviously humans have sentience, but we're not artificially intelligent. We have, what do we have? What is our
I
intelligence?
don't know. I don't
I
know how
don't know either.
I don't know how. But if you have a pet, you can tell the dogs have it too. It's not just us. I mean, they're just at a low level, but I don't know, sentience. And it's all connected together. You see that if you do a lot of meditation, you start to see more of the fabric of how things are all connect together. And honestly, when I was sitting one time, maybe after 20 years practicing, I was in a very deep state. My mind began to change over, uh, like maybe after this really long retreat, my something about my mind shifted. Like I put everything down. My mind just became very, very quiet. And underneath, I've started to contact this underneath part that we call samadhi, and it was very, very bright. And that took many years of work. This really bright state. But I was sitting in Korea. That's when I started to come back to Korea. That's the behind story of why I returned to being a Zen monk.
Hmm.
And I was sitting in this retreat, and after about 3 weeks, I was in this very bright state. Suddenly, it exploded. And what I saw was this infinite field of interconnected strands of light, of energy, and it was like this. Uh, I don't know, like a ray traced map of interconnected. It's kind of like the organic structure of consciousness. What I think it was, I have no idea. It's in the literature though of a lot of people talk about that do this kind of study. They call it the net of Indra. There's different names for it, but to me, this what I saw was a structure of all consciousness together. I could tell because on the top of this field, there were a bunch of bundles tightly knotted together that I could hear or feel human voices. And, then it branched down to every other different kind of consciousness. And it struck me that if that's what that was, that it's just as substantial as matter and energy. It's part of reality that we're not aware of, we're not able to perceive, but that it's all connected together. It's just one vast field, and it wasn't anything special. It wasn't some heavenly realm or some magical place. It was just organic structure. So that's the way I think about it now.
It's interesting. I mean, as somebody who doesn't meditate, I mean, I more than once a week when I do yoga for the 5 minutes they make me lay on my back with no music and in a dark room, before I can get up and go home and do, get screamed at by my 2-year-olds. I I I do think that there's more to the existence that's around us. I mean, we have 7 billion people on this planet, and
Yeah,
we see a picture of human, suffering, and it's like I don't feel 100% disconnected from that. Um, I
yeah,
There's
we're all
something else.
bond together.
We're bonded together. I mean,
Have to be. It's like I saw what maybe last year I saw a baby snake in the courtyard in the monastery where I'm training, and it was just came out of the egg and it was by itself. And I realized that snake had never seen its mother and would probably be alone its whole life, well, except for mating. But very different than human, because a human has to bond together with other humans
to
for
survive.
to survive. If you put a baby by itself, if it did survive, it wouldn't be human. I mean, it's like this moment world again, like we're immediate creatures of the immediate environment, of being together with other people. Society teaches us to what a human is, and we grow up in that environment, and that's what we are. So, it's something that requires a constant contact with each other. Like there's nothing about the human that is an individual. It's
Nothing.
we're bonded together completely. So the work that
Completely.
we're doing too, we're informing the new people coming up, of some more information. We're adding to that field.
Yeah, it's
So that's
amazing. We started this conversation talking about how writing is basically, the the predecessor of everything communication wise in our culture. I mean, granted, maybe sitting around the fire as, the beginnings of Homo sapiens, we had some kind of rudimentary form of communication, and we used to draw on cave walls to mark our, we were here or whatever. But the moment that we started marking on pieces of papyrus and sending it off to other villages is the moment that we kind of started to rise up, because we were able to kind of continue a record. Oh, this year I had 3 ears of corn. Now I have 5, or something along those lines. I mean, the record was continued. We had something to actually mark our progress, and now
yeah.
20 years from now, whether or not you're Anne Rice or not, whether or not your novel continues, whether this podcast gets listened to by 5 people or 5,000, the march continues on. I get to talk to my children with your voice in my head, whether I recognize it or not. I get to think about Zen, and I get to listen to these. I mean, whether I will ever remember the terms that you actually used, this conversation is going to continue. My voice will be in your head, whether or not you actually, whether I said anything worth remembering or not. I mean, we'll be able to pass on this knowledge, and this is very interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of uh, that's one thing I was talking about yesterday with the people here in Busan. That the point about being a Zen monk or a figure in this movement is that you keep this thread alive, so that when people contact it, when they see it in you, they understand something, and then they start to grow that part. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. So if in writing to me is just as important, maybe more important, that you can record something that when people contact it, they get it, and that it grows in them. It's, to me, it's the most sophisticated, the most evolved form of communication that we have. If a scientist doesn't make a song, he writes a paper, with which he may edit again and again and again to make the flow perfect and really reveal exactly what the point is.
It's very interesting. What is the biggest creature on Earth, inconnected? Isn't it the Joshua tree? The thing
I don't know
in
about Joshua Tree. I don't know. I know that bamboo is probably on the list, because
like the
it's
most
just one.
inconnected thing. It's like this organism that is gigantic through its root system. I can't remember
Yeah,
what it's called, but you know what I mean. But
sure.
in terms of language and communication, it almost feels like humans are now even more so with this internet and satellites and whatnot. We're so interconnected. We can connect with
Yeah,
each other
it's
so.
it's the physical manifestation of what we are. We're just manifesting the human. in technology. That's why I always think it moves towards a Borg-like state eventually. You know, this interconnection becomes an entity itself.
It's so interesting. I love Joe Rogan. And he might seem like a meathead or whatever, but he has some fantastic guests. And he had an astrophysicist, I think. I maybe was wrong about the actual title, but the guy was talking about specifically about what your brain is. You know, what if you replaced one of your neurons with a cybernetic cell or something like that? Will your brain still be a human brain? What if you replaced it with 2 or 3 or 4? When does it stop being a human brain? And there's the question of robotics and consciousness, and when can you actually place your consciousness, this thing that we can't even put a finger on, what makes you you, and what separates you from the shell that you call your body or whatnot. You know, one day you might exist in a box or microchip or the internet.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the behind question of the work of is this quote, the problem of dying, of losing the entity. And if you had this place that you could enter into the AI, then you would be eternal, but you would lose your identity. So that question, that human question of my losing the self, that's where Zen ties into it. And you know, basically that's what we all have to resolve in our life is
It's very
ultimately
interesting though,
we'll
because
die.
I remember you were drinking a cup of tea, I think.
Yeah.
I heard you drinking it. I wasn't watching you do it, but you had a nice size, and I pictured it being a palm size ceramic, you know, Korean style cup of tea, and you were taking sips of it and putting it down, and whatever was in that bowl style cup had been brewed in a style that was probably generations old, and whoever originated that style of brewing had died a very, very long time ago, hundreds, maybe possibly thousands of years ago. That person and that knowledge that was passed forward is nameless, personalityless, but yet through the manipulations of generations upon generations of people, he still exists in terms of that manipulation of those leaves and that water to make that beverage that you got to enjoy. You never probably even thought about him. You got to enjoy a beverage that, you know, was made by somebody who didn't think about him.
Yeah, like it's a community of, well,
Effort.
you know, that's, yeah, you know, I don't really understand because if you look at the math, there's 7 billion people, I think
Yeah.
now. Where did all of these entities come from? I mean, mathematically, they couldn't have come from
Sex.
someone before.
They all
But
came from sex.
there's something about, you know, I read Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel. Did you
Yeah.
read that?
Yeah.
Uh, so he talked about these pygmies tribes that there were people there that were just like people he knew in Brooklyn. Like there's something of there's a reflection that continues in the human
Yeah.
strain
It's
all over
very,
the world.
I know what you're talking.
Same
It's
type.
very interesting. Like, where did we originate from? These little cells and the primordial ooze of the planet that was close enough to the sun, but far enough away to where water didn't turn into steam, but not far enough away to turn into ice as well. So, I mean, this perfect place to where this thing could survive and become something else, dinosaurs and humans and whatever the hell. I mean, it's crazy, right? And now here we are being able to talk billions of years later. Like, what? Or
Yeah,
millions of years later. It's like, what?
yeah. It's interconnect so much.
It's
You know
like
that we
accidental.
it's
You think it's an accident? There's like a God? No. What is this? Who the hell knows, right? I mean, we can sit here all day long and talk about the miracle of us or the random accident of us or the randomness of the atoms or the perfectness of this, but nobody knows. It's all just a guess. And then we
yeah.
die, and the next generation comes up and goes, well, I know all the answers. Oh, do you? Because I didn't
Well,
give you any,
yeah, we
right?
get lost in the complexity of it. It's just impossible to imagine what could be driving something like that.
But
But
that's what I
if you
find so
look at,
beautiful is that you spent 8 hours, or I don't know how long you spent meditating, and you found something, right? You found
yeah,
an
I can
answer.
see, yeah, I can see, but it's more than just seeing some part of it. It's becoming aware of the intention. It's like you become harmony, become in accord with the thing, the thing that's constantly arising. It's like this amazing force that's that's bursting out in all the phenomenal things.
Does the
That
answer matter anymore since having that epiphany or that moment? Or does it make it, I mean, obviously when I stand in front of like a beautiful painting at the Met, you know, I'm gobstruck struck by the absolute magnificence of the work that went into that piece of art. Not so much of the fact that, you know, it didn't exist prior to the artist's manipulation of the materials. And then when I walk away, there's going to be another painting to look at.
I think the questions only get more profound, but
Really?
there's
Okay.
but it's like once you make that shift, to me it's a shift. Like your personal effect becomes diminished, and this one mind, this universal uh, God presence starts to take over and flower through you. Once that starts to happen, then it's more like a party. You know, it's more, everything is wonderful, and you love people and life, and you can see why things appear the way they do. So there's some kind of intuition, of inner knowing, because you're informed by that. The same way the writing works. It somehow, if you let the flow, once you get in the flow, you know, it just starts to burst into form like that. You make friends with that thing,
I mean, I'm
but
never
you don't.
friends with my writing. It's always working against
Oh,
me.
it's hard. Oh, it is hard. Why do you want to be
Because
a
I got to
writer?
keep
It's
going
so
back
hard.
into it and editing it and changing things and
Yeah,
adding commas. Like, you bastard, that's not the word I wanted.
you have to be really, you have to be allow the mistakes, you know, and then come
Yeah.
back and be
But
ruthless.
I will say this though, once I get that story and it's like, okay, fine, I don't see any more mistakes. It is a beautiful thing when
Yeah.
I'm content enough and I send it in and, you know, I hit publish and somebody comes back and says, whoa, dude, that's an awesome piece. And I want more of that. I want more of that. Whoa, dude, that's an awesome piece. And I don't get enough of that. My ego needs to get more stroked. Because
You know,
honestly,
to me, maybe because I only write in short bursts, and but it's automatically, it's it teaches me because it's, I don't edit that much the piece, and it fits out of time into another part that I don't know yet. And
mhm.
then and once the puzzle starts to arrange, that's the real part of editing me, is arranging these pieces and putting them in the correct order, because whatever's going on with my right brain, it's out of sync with reality. So that's the hard part. But the pieces themselves are wonderful, you know.
Mhm.
That's the mystery
It
to me.
always feels good. It really does. When you, I
Yeah.
mean, I know what you're talking about. When you find the love of the piece that you've just written, you're like, wow, that's beautiful. I cannot believe I just wrote that. And that's a wonderful feeling. It really
Yeah.
honestly is.
Yeah. That's, I think that's why we do, you know. But you
Yeah.
know, it's, to me, a lot of times I can't really see that it's anything interesting until much later. Like Beckett, you know, he used to bury his books for years and then before he would publish them, just not look at it for a while.
That's the hardest part, isn't it? Giving it up, and being able to come back to it and do a little editing. Like the piece
That's,
that I
yeah.
have on Amazon right now, man, I want it to be science fiction. I want it to be slightly in the future. You know, I want it to be this slightly dystopian future where one of my characters thinks he has magical abilities. Obviously, he doesn't. But I published it a little bit too soon, and I didn't realize that that's what I wanted.
Uh-huh. Right,
But
right.
I want to revisit it now. I want to take it. Nobody knows it's there. You know, I mean, like when I published that stupid thing, 4,000 other people published their stories right on top of mine, and it got flattened like a pancake and disappeared
Yeah.
into obscurity. And
But
I have no,
you can update your, you can
yeah,
update. I guess
totally
you
can.
can't really change the story that much though, I guess, if you've
No, I
already
can. I
published.
mean, it's invisible. So I mean, it's like I don't know how to market for crap. So it's like,
Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
all right. I mean, what are you going to do now that your copy edits are done? You have your story back in hand. What are your plans? You got a cover?
I'm gonna get a really good cover because I spent 10 years on this project, and it's something really beautiful. You know, my plan right now is, believe it or not, I'm gonna send it to agents for a while, and the first of the year, I think the first competition is Faulkner Wisdom, which
Mhm.
I was a semi-finalist with the first book in that competition.
Oh, good for you.
So I wanted to go back in with a real novel, because what I did before was autobiographical and it didn't really fit that format. So that's my first thing, is to do some contests. and maybe a podcast. I don't know. I think at the time that I did the first book, which was the Zen Revolution, that was just when podcasts started to appear, and people were publishing on podcast and uh, independent publishing. They were starting to publish and do things like that because it was new and there wasn't that many people, and it was interesting, or just to give it away for free.
Yeah.
Just try to get your name out there somehow.
So
And
where's the first novel at right
it's
now?
on Amazon. It's on
Oh, it's on.
it. Oh, you mean it's pretty much invisible. But what I did was, I
Have you
have my
thought of
own
maybe
niche.
breaking it up and putting it up in the blog form and or republishing it, or are you gonna
Sometimes,
actually, you know what? I don't, that wasn't what I was gonna say. What I was gonna
yeah.
suggest is what this is your number 51 in terms of podcast. And what I've noticed, a lot of people that have gotten kind of successful, like my last interview was a gentleman by the name of Jonathan French, and he was somewhat successful indie. He was a straight speculative author, standard Tolkien type of fantasy,
Right, right.
and he had gotten a little bit of a following, but he had submitted his second series with a blog, fantasy, blah blah, whatever it was called, and he won. Got a lot of traction. Got a traditional publisher interested. Got a editor. Found an agent, and now he's looking at the future, going, "Oh my God, my life is different." And it seems like a lot of people who are getting success are winning contests, and
Yeah, I think that's yeah. Sure, if
a
you
lot
can
of
win,
other
but
people
that's
are like going straight to the publishers and skipping agents altogether.
yeah, that's another thing. That's what I did at first because I didn't really understand how everything worked back in '99, and before really the internet was happening. I went right to a publisher with the book that I had, with initial form,
What
and
happened?
he wrote back and said, "This is interesting, but I don't know what to do with it. I
Oh,
don't
that's
think it was
interesting.
packaged right, and I didn't have a platform, and it's nonfiction. There's a lot of parts to that I didn't have in place. So, but I took that as, oh, my extremely developed piece of art is not uh, respected by the industry, so I won't do writing anymore. I'm going to do something else. That's when I got into film.
And the good thing
But
is you actually have another novel too. You have two novels in your hand right now that, I mean, nobody knows about the first one right now. So if you pulled that one off of Amazon, so you have two of them in your hand, you can start playing with both of them. You can start putting them both in the contest and start submitting them both to the same publishers or something along those lines. I
no,
don't know.
I'm not good at marketing. It's not
Neither am I,
something that's yeah.
man. Neither
So
am I.
so
That's
what
the
I want,
problem, though, because the reason that I started this podcast is to develop kind of a conversation with other artists and authors and try to figure out what they're doing, and also to try to generate an audience. Those eyeballs are
sure.
really important, and the more eyeballs
Yeah.
you kind of get after you and trying to read your stuff, maybe agents will pay attention, maybe publishers will pay attention, but I don't know. Contests are important, and
Yeah, so I don't have a clue, but I'm going to. You kind of find things as you go along. Like
exactly.
when I was working on the first book, I was giving away a lot of copies. I put it on Scribd, and I have it on the website. I have a dedicated website to it that I give it away for free. And I track my own my own server. So I mean, I probably have 20,000 copies out. People who downloaded. I've sold
Wow,
some.
that's a good
I have it
number.
on Audible. Yeah, but I'm not using that name anymore, and I'm not doing a Zen book. It's kind of like when I was working on film. I decided, I did a documentary, and I know I can do well with that format, but that's not what I want to do.
Is there any chance that you collected those 20,000 download like emails or whatever? Then you can like hit up those people.
Your server logs don't say anything about you. You can see the countries. You can see like some information, but you don't have any. But anyway, I mean, so I know that I can find an audience, but it's I don't want to just give away a novel again. I think
Yeah.
that's a good way to get a start. I think that was right. And I also had there's some kind of web service where you get a sticker. I can't remember the name of it, and you put it on your book, and then you just leave it in a cafe somewhere, and people pick it up, and then they share it with each other. It just kind of drifts around the world, people sharing it. I gave away hundreds of copies like that at cafes all over the place. I was traveling around just planting copies in places, put them in bookstores.
Yeah,
I
guerrilla
was,
marketing. It's not. I don't
yeah,
see anything wrong with that either.
yeah. And, I think, and because my niche is kind of specialized, a lot of people know me. So everyone from my group, of course, read it. Everybody knows about it. That I have, and the podcast, I haven't, all I did with the podcast was do the 21 chapters of the book. I never did another episode. It's just the book itself. So it just kind of drifted off into obscurity, really.
Are
After, I
you
mean,
thinking about starting another podcast? Because I think you got a good
yeah,
message, man, in terms of Zen,
yeah,
Buddhism, and being where you are, American out of America in Korea. I mean, why not, right? I mean, you could either do it
yeah,
by yourself or you can have guests on.
yeah. And there's
Get
some
your
really
voice
cool
out
people.
there.
It's like there's only every country there's maybe two or three people that end up over here that are that dedicated to it. So there's some a very specialized group of people that, but mostly people don't want to be in public that much.
It's hard.
They're,
It's either
yeah,
one way or the other to look at this thing. Either podcasts are good right now or everybody's doing a podcast, and I can't decide which one it is.
I really love it though. I listen to all the technology shows and news. There's and comedy. I really like my favorite one right now is How Did This Get Made? Do you listen to that one?
I have. Oh, I do. I have listened to that one from Earwolf. Earwolf,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
yeah, I
Earwolf.
love that show. Yeah,
I
I mean, there's
unfortunately I end up like subscribing to a bunch of them, and they'll sit on my phone, and eventually my phone will yell at me, "You have
right.
no room on your phone any longer," and I know exactly why. End up having to delete everything.
Yeah, you don't have time to listen to, but
Yeah,
it's I used
they
to read
rack
at
up.
night. Yeah, there's no way you could listen to all of them. But yeah, I think it's wonderful. When I was working in LA, it kind of saved me because you need to have a human voice in your ear when you're doing menial tasks or whatever. It's a real nice way to go through your day if you have a repetitive task.
Do
I think.
being a monk, do you have repetitive tasks to accomplish on a daily basis? Is your job kind of menial
No.
or no?
No, not really. I do, we have a practice schedule, even when we're not on retreat, that takes a good part of the day. And we always wake up at 3 in the morning. So
Wow,
from
yeah.
3 to maybe 7 or 8, we're busy. And then in the evening, we have another practice schedule. In the middle of the day, there's some small jobs that we have, different things going on. There's a lot of the afternoons free. But if I'm in that monastery practicing, I don't write that much. It's too intense. The breaks in the day are you need to rest and take care of errands and things. But when I go to the mountain in Baekdomsa in near North Korea, when we're doing those long retreats, then I have a number of breaks during the day that are more than an hour long. And I go, it's one of the biggest national parks in Korea. I go deep into the mountain there and bring my paper, and that's where the writing happens. So, and if I'm busy, if I don't have those kind of long periods of times to really collect myself and write, then I just do editing or develop outlines or work on different parts, you know.
What is the practice like?
There's meditation is an hour long session, and at Baekdomsa there's four of them a day with 2 rounds each. So you sit for 2 hours, and in between the hours you walk for 10 minutes. The meditation, it's something that I've been meditating for more than 30 years. So at this point, it doesn't require much effort at all. I don't I don't have any stress or to me I can just sit and go into samadhi very easily and be very happy. And that samadhi state is continuous. It's all the time. But at first meditation is like it's like a repetitive task. It's trying to pin your mind to some so that it can stay stable and rest in the moment, which is impossible. It takes years and years of hard effort to develop a sense even of the muscle that's there that can hold still. It wants to rest, but it doesn't know how. We don't have that skill. It's kind of like an organic thing. You have to grow that ability. But if you and what we call it as the center, your Tanjin, the energy garden. Maybe you hear that in
Mhm.
yoga,
I've
the
never heard
central
of it before.
balance of your body,
Energy garden. I
or
like it
Tai
though.
Chi. But
I love that. That's
yeah,
beautiful.
so you develop from there. You start to act from that center of gravity. And then once you develop that, then it naturally just grows. You develop a ability to stay in that state. And then long retreats are no problem. Before, it's hell. It's very difficult to sit for 8 hours a day. I think for anyone,
Yeah.
it's difficult at first. But sometimes I
Then
do a
that's
solo
amazing.
retreat. Sometimes I do a solo retreat that's 12 hours a day for 100 days. I have a retreat house in Louisiana that I built from Hurricane Katrina salvage out in the forest. You can only go there in the winter though because the bugs are terrible in Louisiana. It's like a jungle. And I sit for 100 days out there. I've done it 4 or 5 times.
Do you
And
make it back
there,
to the States very
if you
often?
do I what?
Do you make it back to the States very often?
Oh no, I haven't been since I came here. No, I pretty much I'm here probably for years. I have 2 more years of training at Baked before I'm fully ordained. And here, the culture is very supportive of this kind of life. If I try to do this in America, and I have before, you basically end up having to just get a job and have a normal life. You can't just focus on meditation and work, writing. It's impossible. It's just not supported.
How
And
does the
and
government treat you in terms of like an immigrant or an
I
expat?
I have I have a religious visa. That
Oh,
means maybe once a year, every 2 years, I have to go pay a little fee and get another paper signed, and that's it. And I can stay indefinitely. But if you're coming here from America, you have 3 months. Same as a Korean person coming to America. You have 3 months tourist visa, then you have to leave the country. So it's hard to get a visa. It takes a
yeah, I would
while.
imagine. So I mean, it's through the monastery then.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Oh, that's a regular coffee cup. I was expecting it to be one of those, go to the Korean barbecue and
They have become westernized now. Very much. They're very modern. It's strange because it's a third world country in some ways, and there's all kind of old cultural things embedded in their culture, but they're very modern. Their infrastructure is better than ours. The
it's
technology
interesting.
is everywhere. It's kind of like Tokyo, some ways.
This was a fantastic conversation. I'm so happy that I invited you and you said yes, and I came back at you and
Yeah.
got you scheduled and all that good stuff. And I'm so excited for you that you're finished with your second novel, and I wish you all the best with that. Has there been anything that you wanted to cover that we haven't had an opportunity to talk about?
No, it was very delightful. I'm happy to meet you and discuss all of these things. I hope to hear about your work in the future. I'd love to read your book. Send me your information. What book did you write? What's the name?
Compounded Interest is the name.
Compounded Interest.
Yeah, it's a story
Wonderful.
about addiction, for
Okay,
lack of a better word.
I'm gonna pick that up. And mine, I don't know, it eventually it'll be on Amazon. It's called Another End of the World, and my editor describes it as Snow Crash on Salvia.
So I have the title as End of the World.
Another End of the World.
Another End of the World. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's kind of, once the Borg-like state appears, this AI entity becomes sentient, then people start to enter into it, and all of the interconnected web of humanity draws everyone else. So eventually everyone enter, and it's the end of our cycle on this earth.
Well, how about this? Let's get you on the podcast again when you figure out what
Ah,
your marketing plans are going to be too, so we
okay.
can get, a better sense of where to buy the book and where to send people to upvote and vote and whatnot, your content.
Yeah,
Because
I'm
I mean
going
that,
to do some kind of thing, like the what I did with the first one, some kind of podcast, something. Release pieces of it at a time, but I
yeah.
haven't really figured that out yet.
I mean
I like to do
that's
stuff.
the exciting part is obviously the writing, but it's very individualistic. I mean, you're not going to invite people into that process. It's messy. Um, it's very personal. But in terms of the marketing, that's where the party is. That's where you invite lots of people to participate. So I mean, I'm very excited to find out what happens. And are you writing the third book now, or are you
Yes.
taking a break? You are good.
Yeah, I started on the outline already, and there's a whole new section now. That basically the story set in New Orleans, and that whole thing uh, becomes its own entity. The next phase will be L.A., the city I love, and so
Yeah.
L.A. is going. The devil's already in L.A. now, so
So
I'm
you're
writing
writing
that.
a series, all 1, 2, and 3, or is this 2?
I think so. I think the
Okay,
story's big. I've created a universe that I want to continue. It's big enough that I can write several. I don't know how many.
that's exciting.
But
That's exciting.
I'm very happy that I created that universe. That's what took the time, to make a myth that didn't exist before,
Do you think
a new
if
way,
you
all
hadn't,
different kinds of.
do you think if you hadn't explored your, I don't know, I'm going to call it inner peace, but if you hadn't explored your
Hey,
samadhi,
I-
your energy garden, do you think you would have been the writer that you are?
you
Can you hear me? Hello?
hey, you're cutting. You're cutting. Oh, you're back now. Okay, I
Oh,
didn't
okay.
hear that last question.
Oh, I wanted to know, do you think if you hadn't, you know, explored Zen as much as you had, if you hadn't found your samadhi, maybe I'm using the word wrong, or, your energy garden, would you have been the writer that you are today?
No way, no way. It's completely dependent on that. It's kind of. I noticed that when you're doing a long retreat, you develop whatever it is that's in your, uh, I don't know, in your sphere. The thing that's bothering you in your life becomes resolved. Your skills become magnified. It's like you concentrate your power. So this writing thing has grown up through the practice, through many iterations.
It's
It's really
fascinating.
my secret. Yeah, it's
Um,
it's a wonderful way to work on a craft like that.
when I think a sand garden is this the same type of religious practice?
That's a Japanese
Oh, it's Japanese. Okay.
art. It's an artistic how do you say, expression of Zen.
It
It's this
is.
kind of this. I don't know. It's just that's their interpretation.
It's very
But
interesting.
I'm not from a Confucian culture, and I think my insight, my idea is that for Western people, if this is going to continue in the West, if this is going to be, maybe I have a different name, but if we're going to have a culture of this kind of deep meditation, then it has to be articulate, and it has to be in our voice and through our images, our pop culture. It can't be, something from the Asia. Nobody cares about. I don't play a flute. Actually, I'm a guitarist, so sometimes we do shows. I play some rock and roll. I play stuff from New York. I play Blonde Redhead, you know, Chelsea Wolf, something like that. Something that I like.
So you don't think that we could take another culture and bring it here? And
I don't think that's not what we should do. I don't think no people want that. They don't want me to assimilate another culture and then spit it back out. They want something original, and it has to be articulate. I think people's now their tastes are actually higher than they were before because we're swamped with things. So I don't know. It's changed. Did you read the Preacher comic? Have you watched that show, The Preacher?
no, but I don't know who you're talking about. I think it's
It's
from
a new series out now.
it's
It's
from the same
it
people who did Walking Dead, if I'm not mistaken.
well, Preacher is a comic from the late '90s, and
Hmm.
it's it's very interesting because that's kind of the last gasp of pop culture before the internet. And and like Clerks was from back then, I guess. The movie Clerks with Kevin Smith.
Yeah.
It's completely based on pop culture dialogue. The way that the characters talked, was a lot of Star Wars quotes and things like that. Preachers like that. It's just filled with pop culture references. Now today, that's completely disappeared. Now people talk like reality TV and YouTube stars, like this kind of thing. It's we don't have to keep reminding ourselves about cool things in our culture because it's ubiquitous. Everybody already know. Our
It's very
communication is
interesting that you
completely
say that,
changed.
though. because we have a movie coming out that is all based on 80s pop culture called Ready Player One, right? Do you know it?
Oh, I've heard that title.
And the book is
Yeah.
magnificent. And there are other things that for some reason, have escaped me
All
completely.
right.
But that one book is really decent. And the movie's coming out. And there are other
Yeah.
things that have been creeping up lately that just seem to be written around pop culture. And 90s pop culture seems to be kind of slipping back into the vernacular a little bit as well.
Yeah, maybe people are missing that that style. I don't know.
I think
I enjoyed it.
I think we're constantly kind of reminiscing about previous decades.
Yeah, and I think reality TV, I hope, has kind of run its
It
course,
hasn't.
and
It has not, unfortunately.
it's really it's really big in Korea. But
It
the
has.
thing that I never really liked YouTube. I mean, I like to be able to learn about things very easily. I mean, it's a wonderful database of things. But the YouTube star, which is sort of an infamy, it's because they're a failure that they become famous, but they're not aware of it. This part I don't really like.
I don't know. I only follow one person on YouTube. Her name is
Yeah.
Grace Helbig, and I don't know what it is about her. She just makes me laugh, and that's it.
Yeah.
She's just a comedian.
Right. Yeah.
I again really appreciate you taking the time out of your day and doing this with me, and I really want to do it again. When you have a marketing plan, and we'll get you on here to talk about it. To sum up, I asked two questions. The first one, I'm really interested. What are you reading right now?
I just finished another wonderful William Gibson book, Pattern Recognition, which is kind of complicated. His prose, though, my favorite. I think he's my favorite writer right now. I love William Gibson, um, and some Zen books. Right now, I'm actually reading Ghost in the Shell, the manga, the first
Are you
volume one.
okay? I have to read
Yeah,
that. I didn't even realize
because
it was a graphic novel. I thought it was always the cartoon. I kind of can't remember what they're called.
I'm kind of staying in the cyberpunk uh, field. I want to stay in that for a while because I'm trying to just I don't know. To me, cyberpunk is more of a hard-boiled fiction kind of detective novel style, film
Uh-huh.
noir kind of thing. And I'm trying to do a different genre, more like cyber cult or something like that has a voodoo culture in it. But there's
Yeah.
certain parts of the prose I really like. The timing. There's something about it that's really fascinating to me, especially somebody like William Gibson, who's such a terrific writer that
I'll check him out. I've
I
never even
just
heard
want to.
before.
He did Neuromancer, and
Oh,
kind of,
oh, 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 okay. I know who you're talking about now then. He's classic. He's
yeah,
classic.
sure. Yeah, he was terrific. And his Mona Lisa Overdrive, the third of the Sprawl series of that Neuromancer, Count Zero, and Mona Lisa Overdrive was if you read it, it's the format that Daniel Suarez used for Damon. He even mentioned that's his favorite book.
I've
So
never even
there's
read Neuromancer though because I am
oh
lazy.
wow.
I need to read that one so bad. It's a classic though. It's like 100% a classic science fiction story.
Yeah, here's the opening line. The sky above the port was the color of television tuned to a dead channel.
Yes, and that's the opening line of Neuromancer, right?
Yeah, he's kind of like it's like real literature. That's what drew me to this whole field because it has a beautiful prose to it. His writing is very technical and colorful and wonderful.
You know who
Like the
made me
old
want to write science fiction was Kurt Vonnegut, and he's not even a real
oh
science
yeah.
fiction writer. He's a satirist, but I just wanted to write that humor type filled science fiction
I understand.
thing that
Yeah,
he
I
did.
for me it was Ray Bradbury. Ray
Ray
Bradbury.
Bradbury, my God, yeah,
But
he's good.
but he's more of a horror style. But there's something about him that's
Dystopian,
classic.
right?
Yeah, and he's
Absolutely.
full bore writer, not just some kind
Yeah.
of genre fiction.
I just did a Mirage last night with Jason Abbott on Edgar Rice Burroughs, who basically inspired everybody in the 20th century to write.
Yeah, Edgar Rice Burroughs, yeah. I just read one of his books.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the one I don't remember, it's two people on an island,
I don't
kind of
know.
a I
We
can't remember,
ended
kind of
up
like a
talking
Tarzan
about
and Jane thing.
yeah, we ended up
Yeah.
talking about Tarzan for like an hour. That's
Yeah, he's
basically
brilliant. Yeah,
yeah,
he really struck me in my younger days. And
especially.
many writers, but he was one of my favorites, yeah. It
Um,
holds
what
up well.
what would you? And the last question I always ask is, what would
Oh,
you
yeah.
recommend for somebody trying to, write and having a hard time, struggling doing it?
Get on your feet. If you're walking, then your mind is already working in a different way.
What a
If you
unique way to.
walk,
Yeah.
if you walk, then it's like if I can't sit at a desk and write. As soon as I walk 10 feet down the street, it's already boiling out of me. So always have paper with you and something to write with. And yeah, that's to me I think the brain is linked or something. There's something. It's
No,
like
absolutely.
meditation.
That's a really good one. When I was writing compounded interest, I would write in the morning until about 1 o'clock, and I would get up and I would go for a walk, and I would think about what I wrote, and if I had any issues, I would fix them on that walk.
Yeah, and
It's
any
brilliant.
kind of it's something deep. If it's something deep, then get to a point. I think Daniel Suarez talked about this. Get to a point where you're stuck, or the story has a leaping point, and then go to bed. Wake up in the morning, and then it's already been baked in the oven. It just comes out in this huge volume of information
My
appears out of
problem is if I have a problem with a story and I think about it when I'm trying to fall asleep, I'll toss and turn for hours thinking
it.
about
You're
it. Yeah, I
yeah.
won't let it go. It'll eat at me. It's like, oh man. And then I'm worried I'll forget about my solution, which never happens. It just sits there and I wake up the next morning and pound it out and I'm good to go. Man, Hoodoo Jones, you are a magnificent conversationalist, and I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. This was a really great hour and 28 minutes. I think we actually spoke with a little bit longer than an hour and 28 minutes. Did we miss anything? Did you want to fill in any gaps that we might have
Well,
opened and didn't necessarily
let's
close?
let's continue next time. Take it back up and look at some stuff. Maybe
All right,
something
man.
will appear. Okay, great to talk to you.
All right, man. Thank you for being with me today.